Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Can You Hear Me podcast. I'm Rob Johnson, president of Rob Johnson Communication.
And I'm Eileen Rochford, CEO of the Harbinger Group, a marketing and strategy firm. Today, we're talking about business practices that we believe need to change. Those things that make us all roll our eyes, but somehow they still persist in the workplace. Rob, I know you and I both have some very strong opinions about what those things should be. But let's start with you. What practices in the workplace would you like to see disappear, say in 2025?
Well, I got to tell you, the list is pretty long, and I know we only have a certain amount of time, so I know we're going to hit the ones that are most top of mind for us. So I've got a couple of practices I think really need to go. The first one I want to talk about is micromanaging. The leaders who can't seem to let their team members take a single breath without supervision. It's not just annoying, it's actually harmful to both productivity and morale. And I'm surprised in 2024, we're still talking about micromanagers. Because have you ever heard, Eileen, somebody say, so-and-so's a micromanager and he or she, everybody loves them. They're the best boss ever. Have you ever heard that ever in your professional life? Because I haven't.
No, I have to agree. Micromanaging is probably one of the more irritating tendencies in a manager. No doubt about that. And you have to wonder, what is making it persist amongst kind of human behavior? What is it that drives a person to feel that they need to be that way? Especially after having heard for so long that people hate it. I think there would be a lot more of an effort to abolish the tendency to micromanage. But it's still here.
It's still here. And the other thing is, I said it a second ago, nobody ever says they're a micromanager. They're awesome. They're the best. Yeah. But does it also reflect a lack of self-awareness? Certainly if you're a boss anywhere, you know that people don't like to be micromanaged. And yet maybe your personality is such where you just can't help yourself. So that's part of the story. Is the other part of the story, there's no self-awareness? Because if you were self-aware, by definition, wouldn't you say, you know what, my people are not responding to this, helicopter boss thing?
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Self-awareness has to be, or lack thereof, has to be part of the reason why it persists. I totally agree with that observation. In this, I don't know if 360-degree performance reviews even exist anymore. I really wouldn't know. I haven't heard about them in quite a while, but the opportunity for people on your team to give feedback into how you're doing, either as a manager or as a member of the team, even in places or cultures where that kind of feedback is welcome, whether it's formal or not, I would imagine people are going to feel like that's like the third rail. I can't criticize my manager. I can't criticize, the department head. That's totally there's going to be backlash on me for that.
Yeah.
In places, I'm sure that's still the case. So culture has got to foster the ability for managers like that to still exist. So that's something to examine for sure to get rid of it.
I don't want to get too far off the beaten path because we're talking about micromanagers and you're not a micromanager, but you just brought up an interesting point about like a 360 review. As the boss. Do you welcome that sort of feedback from people on occasion?
Yes. It's hard to get it.
Okay. It's hard because it's like, I don't want to upset the boss, right?
Yeah. They'll frequently hear me say things like when I truly want frank feedback because I'm a pretty frank person. But they'll hear me say things like, look, I am not looking for flattery here. I want the answer,
Right.
So, I guess maybe that's how you create a culture is by, really being adamant that
I always try to let people know when I want feedback, real feedback, that I'm not fishing for a compliment. That's what I'll say. I'm like, I'm not fishing for a compliment. I just need you to be perfectly honest and frank, great word, about how this relationship's going, how my part of it's going in your eyes. And that matters.
It does. Yeah.
So micromanaging, that's one. That's historically unfortunate, right? What do you have? What's something that's on the top of your mind, the top of your list?
Okay. Here's one that I find super creepy, and it's been written about quite a bit in the last few years. How employers are using technology to track their employees, as in where are they, how often or how long are they online, what are they doing when they're online, and this is still a thing, which is wildly shocking. I mean, it always seemed to me like this has got to be some kind of invasion of privacy, but it isn't. Of course it isn't. I mean, when you really think about it from a legal perspective, they have every right, right? But why? Why do they need to do that? That has got to sit with culture. So if you have a culture where trust cannot be fostered because of the way that your managers behave, like maybe the micromanaging, who knows, those kinds of things that erode trust. If that's present, then yeah, you're probably going to feel like, oh, I need to stay on top of these people by tracking their whereabouts, tracking their activities. But surveillance in general, in my opinion, that whole word, that idea, it just creates a culture of distrust, and which ultimately will decrease productivity because employees feel, they're being watched, they're not being valued. And that's just a combination or a recipe for disaster.
You know what I was thinking when you said this? I was like, oh my gosh, we're talking about the same thing. This is the new tool for the micromanager. Like, oh my gosh, I can track people.
Oh my God, you're right.
I mean, think about that. That's what it is. And again, to the point we were making about micromanaging, because this falls under that, I think. Nobody ever says, you know what? I love it that they're always tracking my every, mouse click or whatever. Like nobody says that.
No.
But you know what people end up doing? Because I've heard anecdotally about this from other people who get micromanaged, who get, track like this.
Yeah.
They spend part of the day trying to figure out how to do their workaround. Like there's apps and various other things where it looks like you're doing something, even though you're not. I'm like, so not only does it create distrust, to the point you were making, Eileen, it also creates work for somebody who's like, you know what? They don't deserve to know every little nuance about what I'm doing. And so I'm going to spend time trying to figure out the workaround. And then you're spending time on that and not on what? Your job.
Yeah. Talk about a decrease in productivity.
No, absolutely. Because if somebody's going to introduce this kind of technology, then somebody else is going to say, well, what's the workaround? And I will say this too, as a parent, we both have, kids that are getting a little bit older now, but we both have 19-year-olds. And he's lived away from home because he played, hockey. He left home at like 15, and I never used Life 360. People will be like, why? You got to know where your kid is. I'm like, I don't need to know where my kid is all the time. He has a phone. He has the ability to text. He knows if mom or dad call or text, if it's important to do that. But from a personal standpoint, I don't even like it because I don't need to know. I don't want to know what somebody's doing at every hour of the day. And that certainly translates to what you're talking about professionally, but I don't even like it personally.
No, I don't either. It's funny. Speaking of our 19-year-olds, my 19-year-old, she uses it with all her friends. They all do. They use Find My Phone. They've all shared their locations all over. Mm-hmm. And part of me was like, well, that's smart. You're women on a college campus. I think that's really
that's perfectly. Yeah, sure.
Totally. But they're like looking at, where's my boyfriend right now?
Right. And that is the problem.
It's not okay.
Right. And you know what, and again, we're veering off the path a little bit, but it is relevant to it. Yeah. My son will do Snapchat, and apparently they have the thing where like, Jaden's in Boston today or, whatever. He turns his off because he doesn't want everybody to know where he is. Yeah. Like all of his friends like, Penn State, they're here. They're, all over the place. You can see him, right? Yeah. And he'll be like, I'm turning mine off because I don't want everybody to know where I am. And I'm like, I get it.
Yeah. And it's weird that people know because like people with nefarious intent, including employers, knowing where you are, what you're doing, it just opens up Pandora's box, in my opinion. And plenty of companies use it. I get it. They have reasons, like even say for delivery drivers, fleet management, transportation companies. Yes, of course, they're going to want to know where all their trucks are and where their drivers are. And there's an element of, security and safety built into that. I think in that application, it's fine, but not perhaps for kind of the white collar, let's call it a desk worker type of job. Yeah. It's just frankly creepy in a lot of ways. So you got to question the reasoning why a company thinks they need to have that, in my opinion. And your point about the fleet thing, knowing where your vehicles are, that's fair enough. But I will say in my old career, they had just started, tracking all the vehicles because you need to know. And from when it was news business, it's like who's close to, the Western Burbs. There's a breaking news story. We need to know who's like for that. It made sense. And I never bristled at that. And then on occasion it was, where are you guys? Where I thought you were coming back from. Like if we stop for 10 minutes and eat lunch on the way back from, whatever. And it's like, where, it's like, I don't like. No, eating's allowed. Yes, it is.
Right. Sorry I slacked off today, and on my way back I, stopped for
Ate
to
something.
eat on the go. God
What?
forbid. But the whole idea of knowing where your vehicles were so you could cover things, that made sense.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
just
There are some logical applications,
Yes.
but of
Yes.
course, but that whole idea of what are you doing when you're on your computer? Are you actually using the tools you should be using? That's creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So another thing that really that I just really dislike is professional ghosting. And this isn't necessarily something that I deal with a lot. I've dealt with it on occasion. I've seen clients deal with it though more frequently, and it is becoming increasingly common. And to me it's just not acceptable. Whether it's candidates who don't show up for interviews and you're counting on them, it's clients who disappear mid-project, or companies that would go silent after multiple interview rounds with candidates. Hey, you made the short list here. Hey, this or that. And then all of a sudden, nothing. I just think it's unprofessional. It needs to stop. Why people do it is beyond me, although I've done a little research on it. And it's just, frankly, I think it's emotional immaturity. That's one of the things
Yes.
to chalk it up to. But the other thing is just have the courtesy. If you're going to give me bad news, or if you're going to, if you have to communicate something that's not positive, don't go hide. Because I'm like, well, that's weird. Or somebody would be like, that's weird. They need to communicate that.
Yeah.
And people are doing it with increasing frequency. And I really don't like it. And most of the time, it doesn't even impact me, but it impacts productivity. It impacts the way you feel about the people you're in business with if they're doing that to you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It just makes me absolutely cringe.
Yeah. One of the most unprofessional things out there right now in terms of workplace trends. Absolutely. I agree with you. And it's, conflict avoidance, people who don't know how to deal with, mild friction. There's so many reasons, but I agree with you. The characterization of emotional immaturity is probably at the root of it all. I think people just should remember, the whole golden rule, do unto others, right? And that's true in life. It's so simple, definitely. But sometimes I think people aren't answering questions, say perhaps from vendors or potential partners, because they don't have the answer at that moment, and they have other priorities right in front of them. But to just take the second and say, I know I asked you for your time and you committed it and gave it to us, and I'm deeply grateful for that. I'm working to get an answer so we can close this loop. I haven't forgotten about you, and I'm going to do that. Forgive me, but it could be a couple of weeks until you hear back from me. Just saying that is enough. So what my point is, think about, even if you feel like you don't have the time to respond to that email or that text or voicemail, know that, or you don't have the answer to give to that person. Know that a simple response of I don't know will protect your relationship beyond measure versus never responding to them. So you're going to damage it forever if you don't do that. So it's a matter of, maybe 5 minutes of your time, but do the courteous thing and respond.
Amen to that. Amen to everything you just said. And 5 minutes that number's a little high in my opinion. I'm talking about 30 seconds, maybe a minute. It's a text. It's an email. It's the point you're making. Don't have an answer for you yet. Bear with me. I'll get back to you. That just took 10 seconds. I'm sorry. Press
But
send.
then you have to do the work to get the answer. So
but then you have to do the work to get the answer, but you also don't leave people hanging. And my point about when people don't communicate, when there is this ghosting, whether it be, permanent or temporary or whatever the case is, if you're on the other end of that, you're imagining scenarios for why things aren't going the way you want them to. And then you're wasting time on your end. Like, oh, what about this? I wonder if that means that. And then all of a sudden, let's say somebody didn't have the answer, and that's happened recently, didn't have an answer, but then said, oh, I didn't get back to you because I didn't have the answer, but now I have the answer. We're a go. So so the news was good. Yeah. The news was good. It was the outcome that the client wanted.
Yeah.
But the time that was spent going, well, I don't know. I thought they were all in. I thought they, liked the presentation or whatever the case was. So energy was wasted for no reason at all. And if somebody who's listening to this who has been ghosted, they totally get this. And if you are the ghoster, you may not get it entirely, but we're just telling you, just have the courtesy, 15, 30 seconds to just communicate the fact that you're not ready to proceed at the moment.
Yeah.
And yes, you will have to go get the answer. Yes, you will have to put in the work. But what's the alternative? You're just going to never talk to that person again. You've had this back and forth, this relationship, and all of a sudden, like, you're just going to dodge them forever. Is that the plan? Because it's not a very good one.
No, it's not. And I think just recognizing that ambiguity, particularly protracted ambiguity, really all it does is create emotional distress. Honestly, for all involved, because you're trying, even as the person who's not responding, you're having to like, hide, cower. None of that feels good.
No.
And that leads me to my second thing that I would like to abolish, because it's ambiguous and therefore really impossible to maintain successfully. And that's this concept of unlimited PTO, paid time off. Right. So yes, of course, that sounds phenomenal on paper when you're reading a job description that you're, going to apply for. Heck yeah, sign me up. But of course, everyone knows it's too good to be true. Like, what does that really mean? And how much can I actually take? Those are all the questions, that come to mind and come up. So I find it to be counterproductive because it is ambiguous, and it's intentionally ambiguous.
Right.
And I think I've just, come to recognize that it hurts people more than helps them, because studies have shown employees with unlimited PTO, they actually take less time off than those than at companies that have kind of the traditional policies. Meaning, here's, based on your level of experience, seniority, whatever, here's how many paid time off days or weeks you get. And it's part of your benefits package, and it's really clear. It's in addition to sick time that's legally mandated. It's in addition to paid holidays that the company acknowledges and closes for. But it's very clear, exactly how much that you have to use. And here's why the unlimited PTO, it just doesn't work. There's this pressure amongst team members and companies, this has been proven, where that's their policy. It's almost like this, I can't take too much time off. And so-and-so only took 10 days. I can't take any more than that, even though based on your level, you probably were entitled to 3 weeks off in kind of the normal structure. And so that's not okay. I'd feel pretty ripped off if that were the case.
Right.
Nobody knows how much is enough or how much is okay. Where is the too much line? People just don't know that. Also, there's the really negative aspect of when they leave, there's no accrued time off paid out if you live or work in a place where that's the policy. We have a use it or lose it policy, which is totally fair, because frankly, I want everyone to take their time off.
Right.
And I'm adamant about that. It's nobody's productive if you don't. We actually go through planning exercises every 3 months, even at the start of the year, as much as we can, projecting when will I take time off, so you can secure your time and know that, okay, well, we can't all, 8 people can't be off at the same time or in the department, so we figure that out. And it's, it's done in a very fair way. We really don't encounter those problems where everyone wants the same day off. It's quite rare. But it's my opinion that clearly defined PTO policies actually encourage people to use their time off and do so without guilt. And therefore, they're maintaining, their health and well-being on a sustained basis. And I'd like to see the unlimited PTO mirage erased. That's my opinion.
Based on talking to other leaders and CEOs, is the wind shifting in that direction? It's
so hard to say. Yeah. It really is. Most of our clients have defined, here's how many days off each person gets.
Do you do that at the Harbinger Group too? Is that clearly defined? Like, all right, here's your PTO.
It's in your offer letter. Yes, it's in your offer letter. Absolutely. And annually it gets documented. It's of course increased. The longer that you're with the company, you get additional days put into your package, as it should be, right? So, but you do reach a point. Like, I know some folks we work with, even a few of our client contacts, they've been at their organization so long and they have so much time off that they'll
never take.
They take the payoff at the end of the year because their organizations have the accrued paid time off.
Paid time.
Yeah. So, but they don't just let it ride until you leave. They close at the end of each year and pay you for time that you didn't take.
Yeah, smart.
But there is a maximum attached to that, which I think is healthy, because again, why would someone work themselves into the ground? But they might, because they think that they need the extra money. But that's counterproductive too, just as the unlimited PTO policy is.
But also you raised an interesting point where when you start talking about this subject, you're like, oh, unlimited PTO, everybody's going to take as much as they can. But you brought up a really good point, which is human nature says people would be like, well, I don't want to take as much time as that, or I should be taking less. So there's maybe sometimes a challenge to not take as much time off, and then you're not taking the time off that you're allowed. So not putting fences up around this benefit ends up being counterproductive for not only you, the boss, but the people that work for you.
Yeah. Right? It's ambiguity is the problem. Ambiguity creates emotional distress. That's just the truth time and time again. Got to have clarity. And in this case, I have never seen it work well. I was in one organization before the Harbinger Group where that policy was introduced toward the tail end of my tenure, and it was ridiculous. No, it just, So, okay. So shall we move on to another outdated practice that we want to get rid of, though we have no authority to do so, but we are encouraging our listeners to think about.
That's right.
Can we please just acknowledge that email is archaic? Okay. And the overuse of it is silly, even within organizations. If you've introduced any kind of, Microsoft Suite or Google Workspace structure, there is no reason to use email to that degree, right? So I encourage everyone who hasn't entertained it to just really sit back and think about it for a bit. If you had instead a project workflow environment, which exists in both places, Google to a degree, Google Workspace and within the Microsoft Suite, but you can always, API something in or add another tool like Asana. You're able to see where is a project happening and have conversations in these lovely little places about the project. And you never lose sight of it because it's all in one place, unlike email, where you're constantly hunting for things, or even chats like in Slack elsewhere. It becomes this unmanageable sea of garbage. So let's all learn our lesson and stop doing that so that we can be way more productive and, take more time off. That's my suggestion.
Right. And we won't be tracking everybody as we do it. I think it's a great point, Eileen, because there are so many clunky features for just kind of, the workflow as you're talking about.
Yeah.
And the ones that I like, and I'm an unpaid endorser of Google. I just think Google's so easy, and I love the real-time collaboration, and I love being able to just take a look at, the project and be able to just see where it is. It's very simple, and it's like, who updated it last? I just think when you're working on a project, and all projects are time sensitive, right? That it just helps increase efficiency rather than emails. Oh my gosh, emails are not only are they archaic, they're just so unproductive.
Yeah,
and then you're like, where's the thing you sent me on was that the 18th or the 19th you sent that? Oh, I can't remember. You just spend all this time thinking about other things other than the task at hand, which is right in front of you.
Totally. Same thing with email for scheduling meetings. Let's all just get rid of that and everybody use some kind of calendaring tool, Calendly or the like, because it's just silly. The back and forth.
It is.
It is silly, silly, silly.
Yeah, I fully subscribe to all of our ideas. I love all of our ideas, Eileen.
For sure. And it's just the more that the use of AI in the workplace becomes kind of the norm and is applied in all of these different ways, the more that if you're still clinging to email, kind of, let's be real, the dumber you're going to look. That's just the truth. So it's productivity, lack thereof, all of the, time sucking elements and brain numbing elements of it, but really even your perception as a professional. So moving away from that as a primary means of communication is honestly probably the number one thing that I'd like to see, and the abolishment of heavy use of email.
I love being able to talk about all this stuff because we have no authority to do away with any of this stuff, but we can sit here and say, you know what? That's not great. That's not great. No, we'd like to see that change. And in typical Rob and Eileen, Can You Hear Me podcast spirit, we're offering solutions to a lot of these things too.
We are
not just here's what doesn't work. It's here's what doesn't work and here's what works better. And for the last point we were just making, that's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah. And anyone in any organization who listens to this and wants to learn more about a project management tool. And again, this is hilarious because Rob and I have no sponsors and Asana is absolutely not one of them, but I can never stop talking about how beneficial the introduction of Asana into organization has been. And it's been probably 6 years since we did it. Best decision we ever made as a company, in addition to Google Workspace.
Yeah.
So anybody who's curious and wants to, learn how they can do it or why, always hit me up. Totally willing to talk about it.
And the last thing about Asana is, because we do collaboration on this and other things, that I'm invited into various projects on your Asana. And so for somebody who is a third party, who's not part of the Harbinger Group, full-time workforce, it's pretty simple and pretty, easy to get the hang of. And the things I don't get the hang of, I'll just, talk to one of the folks and be like, all right, I don't get this. Help me with this. So it is intuitive and it's simple. And for those, third parties like that, it's also, it's helpful for the people that work for you. And it's also helpful for the people that work with you.
Right. If collaboration is at the core of what you do as an entity, using a tool like Asana, it just eliminates all of the hurdles and roadblocks and brings everyone into one environment to do great things together.
Yep.
So that's why I love it. We use it with our clients. It's just amazing. You can show, at any given moment, the progress of any project to a client in timeline form, calendar, or any of that, multiple different ways. It's so useful and so productive. And after you do it, a year later, you're going to say, oh my God, can I now just delete my email account? That would be so awesome. Yeah. So
Asana, you know how to get a hold of Eileen. You guys need to have an offline chat here.
Yeah. They're a phenomenal tool. Great product, great customer service. Okay. So I want to just throw in a bonus round just for fun, because I just want to know your opinion.
Yes.
Okay. Annual performance reviews and dress codes. Go.
I think performance reviews are important. I think the way they're done, having had them before, it takes up so much time. I wish and I don't want to sit here and bag on it and then not come up with a great solution. I wish there were a better way, a more efficient way for the evaluators to evaluate and maybe to get, real feedback from the people that are being evaluated. And dress codes, this comes up with one of my big clients about what's appropriate. Are clients in the office that day? Are you meeting with them? Are you not meeting with them? So dress codes, I don't like the idea of a dress code. And when I do presentation training to just about anybody, I always say, who's your audience that day? What's appropriate? Is it the if it's like a blazer and a blouse and a nice skirt or something? Is that appropriate? Is it more dressed down for the women? The men would be maybe suit with open collar. Maybe it's the uniform, like the vest with the Oxford shirt for men. Like, I don't know. And then you're on a Zoom meeting. Is that so? It depends on. I'll just say it depends on the audience. I don't like the idea of a dress code. I just think you need to set specific expectations for the moment, whatever the moment is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I agree with you. That's totally right on. You never want to look like you're not respectful or taking the situation seriously, of course. I will just say that there's, believe it or not, I still encounter some very strange situations of oddly almost puritanical nature dress codes in some organizations. And as recently as like in the last year. So
what would they be, without getting too specific, because that's a whole other rabbit hole.
Length of skirt.
Oh gosh.
Give me a break. It could not be more sexist. Dress codes really they just strike a nerve with me in many ways.
Yeah, I don't like them for all the reasons that I was sharing with you, and for that as well, and the double standard that it creates for certain people to she has to look different than he does. That's not fair.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Let's the more we behave like adults, the less we have to have codes for anything, frankly. So that's something to think about. But on the annual performance review, I want to just say, you said you didn't have a solution. I have a suggestion, which is, we did abolish them. I think they're silly. Yeah. I found them laborious, and no one found them beneficial. No. We switched a couple of years ago to 90-day outcomes charters. So it's planning by flights of 90 days, 4 quadrants. Imagine a piece of paper with, an X, line down the middle, line horizontally and vertically. So you've got your 4 quadrants. One of those quadrants is always professional development. The other 3 are related to role responsibilities, and they're always tied to the goals and objectives of whatever that initiative has outlined, whether it's for the client, whether it's for marketing for the agency. But one of them, so 25% of the 90-day outcomes charter, is always dedicated to professional development. So there's at least one thing in that quadrant that's happening continuously every quarter.
Yeah.
And I'll just reinforce that the other three quadrants, again, they can be if you're in client service, or if you're in, department of an organization. Well-run teams have very clearly defined goals and objectives. So what is your role in that organization or that team or running that account for client? And in that role, how are you going to contribute directly to the achievement of a goal? So you break it down into maybe two things within each quadrant or each of the remaining three quadrants that are not professional development. Again, you could try and Google it. I cobbled it together from having read multiple things.
Yeah.
And the outcomes charter and our version of it was inspired by a few different I don't know. I'll link to the articles, but really the crux of it is when you do it in 90-day flights, you don't lose sight of it. You don't put it off, because at the end of those 90 days, everyone gives a presentation.
There's accountability
to the whole team about what did I accomplish. And once a month at our like monthly big meeting, we report on it too. Here's how far I'm into achieving my outcomes for the third quarter. And but at the end of it, here's how I did, here's what I learned, here's what I'm going to do differently in the next flight.
Well, it's also yes. So you're giving them 90 days. So it's more frequent. It's also more specific to what your expectations are and a whole bunch of different ways to measure how you're doing. And, like the yearly performance review, it always just felt so clunky and like, back in November, this or that. And it's like, you wait once a year to do that as opposed to doing it more frequently as you're talking about, but also giving real specifics, not only about how they're doing, but about, what expectations are and how they're meeting goals that they set themselves, right? So they're setting the goals, and then it's like, are you achieving them? And if you're not, how can I help you achieve them? I mean, it's just more hands-on, and it's more, I think it's more employee friendly.
Yeah. And I can say, like, we did it originally as kind of a pilot, like, hey, let's see how this works. And, do people like it? Is it actually effective?
Yeah.
And after the first quarter, people were like, this is awesome. I know exactly what's expected of me, and I know where I'm supposed to be contributing, and I'm able to hold myself accountable. And it's not this, I'll use that word again, ambiguous-ish vision of what I'm supposed to be in this role at my company or
let's
on my
be honest
team.
about performance reviews. They're rarely like a love fest. Oh my gosh, here's your yearly performance review. You're the best. You're unbelievable. Keep doing what you're doing. There's always the part where you're being maybe, I don't want to say torn down a little bit, but critical eye, like this didn't happen or that didn't happen, or you got to improve on this, you got to improve on that. And it doesn't have a great feel to it. I like your idea. I do.
Yeah, it works really well. So again, we have a template for that little outcomes charter that I'm happy to connect in the show notes.
And we could continue talking about all these things. There's many more to get into, but for the sake of time, knowing that you all are very busy and we appreciate you listening, we're going to have to stop it right there. But I really do appreciate the fact that we were able to share some of these ideas. So that is going to do it for another edition of Can You Hear Me? I'm Rob Johnson. If you'd like to weigh in on the podcast or give us an idea for a topic, because we do accept those, please contact us at our Can You Hear Me podcast page on LinkedIn.
And I'm Eileen Rochford. Thanks everybody for listening. If you like the show, please consider giving us a review on any of the platforms where you find Can You Hear Me? So Apple and Spotify in particular would be great because your reviews help other potential listeners find our show. Thanks so much.